It feels like most creative work is part of some huge franchise these days. The top grossing films of the last 15 years are part of massive IPs that seem hell-bent on taking over every form of media possible. Marvel superheroes are everywhere. The Disney merger brought us more Star Wars than a guy with Star Wars tattoos can f***ing handle. It's way too early in the video to swear. I'm gonna have to edit that. DC superheroes have also, tried. I'm tired. I think I speak for many when I say, it's too goddamn much. Eddie and Tony Burback just made a video about multiverse fatigue. They did a great job. The video is good. You'll hear some of the points that they made repeated here. But screw them, because I actually made this script months ago, and they copied me. They just were able to put it out faster because I'm bad. I'll get back to them in a second. Whatever. You know, Iron Man came out when I was entering my early teens, and it was awesome. And then, as time went on, every new Marvel movie was exciting. We slowly got to see the group that would become the Avengers, and I lived for it as a longtime comic book nerd. Every new post-credit scene drip-fed us a little more of what would become the massive Marvel Cinematic Universe. And fuck was it cool. But then, the Avengers came out, and I left the country for a few years. And I did not spend that time keeping up on the latest movie releases. When I got back, I had missed a lot, and I was very excited to jump back into it. I watched the movies I missed, and I had a great time with them. And I stayed caught up as time went on. This was 2016, by the way, when I got back. But then, I went to college. Towards the end of my time in college, Avengers Infinity War came out. And I didn't go see it. I was just busy. Wasn't that I wasn't interested, I was busy. But then, as things kinda kept releasing, because I'd missed Infinity War, I found I no longer cared. It was just too much. Hell, they put out a Moon Knight TV show a few years back, who has long been my favorite Marvel superhero, and I have not bothered checking it out. Despite the fact that it's Oscar Isaac, who I also love. It's just hard to care. I finally ended up watching Infinity War and Endgame last year at the behest of some friends, and I had a good time with them, but I haven't really bothered with anything else. I don't care. I don't care. And I think, like many of you, I have a similar story with other big IPs. Star Wars, DC, Pokémon. There's just too much fucking shit, and I don't care. It's all too much. And why is there so much of it? Well, capitalism. Look, it's true, capitalism can, in a holistic sense, be blamed for a lot of the problems with the modern world. But I really think to understand what's going on here, we should probably look at something else. I want to look at an IP that does arguably a similar thing to the stuff that I've already listed, but that for some reason I'm not sick of. I realize I haven't defined IP throughout all of this. An intellectual property, meaning anything that exists. Fuck. Dictionary definition. What if I told you there was an IP with its hands in as many pies as any of the other big franchises I've listed, but for some reason, it isn't too much? What if I said there were multiple game releases, a new TV series, endless amounts of model kits, lots of manga, and 0.3 movies on average every year, and it somehow isn't too much? Well, maybe from a more ethical standpoint, it is, plastic consumption alone, but what I mean is I'm not sick of it. Well, there is, and it's called Mobile Suit Gundam. Please stick with me if you're not a Gundam fan. Give me just a little bit of your time. Started in the late 70s as a marketing ploy to sell children's toys, like most cartoons of the era, Mobile Suit Gundam has grown over the years to be an international super success. And it didn't even hit the US until the 90s. But how is a massive franchise made by Bandai Namco with crazy name recognition still managed to keep me interested when other things lose me? I think I can point at a few specific things that allow it to be a big, interesting world, but not totally overwhelming. Number 1, the stories are still good. Going into a piece of Gundam media, there are a few things you can expect. Giant robot fights, political intrigue, a bad guy wearing a mask, child soldiers, Haro. But mostly, a well-told story. Generally, the shows, movies, and manga have a respectable standard of storytelling. Not all of them are going to hit the top 50 on your My Anime list, but they definitely won't be in the bottom. Breakers series, maybe though. But that being said, consistently told stories seem to be something that these larger, generally Western IPs seem to be struggling with. But That's what the Burback boys mostly talked about in their video. But I'm not going to devote 20 minutes to that issue alone here. If you want to watch more of that, go watch their video. After this one, of course. After. Don't you fucking... But I have some other takes to add to this. Point 2. You aren't expected to consume everything. Both Marvel and Star Wars have done a great job of writing a bunch of interconnecting stories that maintain continuity and all lend to some bigger picture. But because of that, it's become so bloated to watch and consume everything that it often doesn't feel worth it. I know there are exceptions, but for the most part, things are pretty tied together. You want to watch and enjoy WandaVision? Well, have you seen Endgame? No? Okay. Well, if you want to watch that, then we need to make sure you've seen Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. All of the Captain America movies. The Thor movies up until, 3? You need to have seen all of the Avengers movies. You need to have seen Ant-Man movies. You need to have seen... And I'm sure I'm fucking forgetting some. God damn it. It's a lot of fucking... Oh, Black Panther! Also, Black Panther's actually really good. I like that one. Wakanda Forever or whatever. It's honestly so much. Star Wars has a similar problem, although it may not be as bad as Marvel's. Things can still be enjoyed, it's just a little less fun if you haven't seen the other stuff. The Mandalorian initially was really, really great on its own, though further knowledge of the Star Wars universe did kind of increase the fun you could have. What I've heard now, it essentially is just the same problem that we're having with Marvel. The Book of Boba Fett was fine on its own, but you pretty much have to have seen Mandalorian in order to really enjoy it. Then anything beyond that, other than, the main movies, I haven't really watched because I can't be bothered. And I was a huge Star Wars Extended Universe guy back in the day. And they decanonized all of that, and I just can't fucking be bothered, man. I was even looking forward to most of them. I just have trouble caring. One of these days, I'll get around to watching them, because, like I said, Star Wars tattoos, but man, it just seems like a lot to jump into right now. And I think I'd rather just watch Hunter x Hunter again. Gundam, on the other hand, doesn't really care what you've seen before. Gundam does have shows and movies that tie together, but they separate it out into timelines to make it pretty easy to consume. It's kind of similar to how gaming franchises like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy work, where there's like a general idea piecing the things together more so than actual contiguous story. And even stuff within the same timeline of Gundam can be watched and enjoyed separately without too much stress, although they are absolutely amplified and better understood if you've seen the other things in the same timeline. I'm not gonna lie to you, Universal Century, which is the biggest and, main timeline of Gundam, can be a lot to chomp on. A lot. In addition, the two biggest non-animation parts of the franchise, model kits and video games, have no tie-ins to any canon whatsoever, so you can just kind of enjoy them at your leisure. It makes it really easy just to jump in and enjoy what you want to. But actually, you don't even have to do that, because Gundam is just fine if you're not into it. Which brings me to point number 3. Maybe my biggest point. Gundam doesn't need to make everyone a fan. It's just fine appealing to a specific audience and sticking to its niche. That's not to say they don't look to find new fans, they just don't care to reach everyone. Marvel in particular seems to have had a big problem with this the past 10 years. After the first movies in the MCU started to get crazy attention and box office numbers with their formula, everything Marvel all of a sudden had to be MCU and have the most widespread appeal possible. It isn't just for comic book nerds anymore, it is entertainment. It is the summer blockbuster. And like I said before, a lot of the content that wasn't MCU was poisoned by its reach. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was destroyed in part by the changing of the roster to better reflect the members of the MCU and have more casual appeal, a thing fighting games aren't necessarily known for. This causes problems. If a thing fans love changes dramatically to reach a wider audience, it puts the fans off. That's one of the reasons people talk about bands selling out. I'm not saying it's good to hate something just because it's popular. I'm saying that it makes sense to not be into something because it's no longer what you fell in love with. And don't you dare get it twisted, this is not an anti-diversity thing. Diverse writers, casts, and stories are nothing but a benefit to the world. The problem, instead, comes from needing to always appeal to a lowest common denominator and repeating the same jokes and tropes over and over and over again because they worked last time. Gundam hasn't really changed in that way. It's still a niche work for a specific set of nerds. Oh, Kitty Man has come to join us. Hey, buddy. How's it going? I actually think Gundam has tried. I've got a kitty right here. Hi, buddy. I actually think Gundam has tried to reach out to a wider fan base. I think they've just done a really bad job of it. For instance, let's look at the two most recent Gundam releases. Mobile Suit Gundam: The Witch from Mercury is the newest Gundam anime series. And it's a fantastic way to jump into the franchise if you've never messed with it before. The show is awesome, but it's still very much a Gundam show. It just does a good job of not letting you know what that means for the first few episodes. I won't spoil it here, but if you want to discuss it, and you're also a big Stinky Gundam fan, come see me on Twitch sometime. I love to talk about that shit. But I have a feeling that a few unsuspecting watchers might be weeded out by the last couple episodes of the first season, even. Because in a very, very short span of time, the show changes dramatically and reminds you what Gundam is. I hope not, but it's possible. Gundam can't help being Gundam. Next, Gundam Evolution, a game I want to love so much, but has so many flaws. Anyway, Gundam Evolution came out with the goal of creating new fans, especially in the West. But it's a game that's so far up its own ass that I think pretty much everyone but the biggest Gundam fans have already left the player base. Heck, and even a lot of Gundam fans have left the player base. Please, Gundam Evolution, get good. I believe in you. You can do it. Replace Overwatch 2 so that all my friends will play this instead. Hi, this is Editing Billy from, like, a month in the future. They announced that Gundam Evolution is ending service in November. So, there you go. It did not do a good job. Actually, this is pretty typical for Gundam. Most of the games they make, Bandai Namco, who are pretty well known for bankrolling and creating a lot of great games and franchises, they suck. They suck. Unless you're a huge Gundam fan. Hell, even if you are a huge Gundam fan, a lot of them suck. And I can't really point to what it is. That's not to say there aren't gems out there. There are a lot of great Gundam games. And even in the bad ones, there are still fun things for fans to enjoy. But Gundam can't help being Gundam. A quick side note. I mentioned Final Fantasy a little bit earlier, and I think they've managed to keep fans interested in the same way that Gundam has. But they also have a lot of the same issues as Gundam, actually. I wonder if there's a difference between Japanese and American approaches to IP that impacts this in some way for me. Hard to say. Okay, I'm making a clear break in the recording here to let you know that while I was writing the script of this video, I kind of happened into an idea that I hadn't thought of when I first started working. So bear with me for just a second, because I'm going to go into the weeds for a little bit, but I think it's interesting if you stick with me. Are you familiar with the idea of auteur theory? It holds that the director of a large creative team is the primary voice in the creation of art. This idea of the auteur is generally spoken of in film spaces, but recently has been used significantly in video games as well. And I think this is often true, though it's not always necessarily the director. For instance, films made by Quentin Tarantino are pretty clearly films made by Quentin Tarantino. Video games made by Hideo Kojima are always Hideo Kojima video games. But I kind of feel like there is a fight against this in some of the modern American IP spaces. Maybe not necessarily on purpose. DC recently brought on James Gunn to try and get, things on track. Most seem to be trying to get away from a director or showrunner's view in favor of a more cohesive feel across many works and different directors. I've often heard this called design by committee, and that's a pretty apt name. Essentially, it means that the corporation, the shareholders, are the auteur of a work. Do Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame feel more like Russo brother films? Or like Marvel movies? There have been many different directors of Marvel movies, but I feel like only a few of them stand out as being works by the director. Specifically, those done by James Gunn and the first one by Taika Waititi. And even he got pretty Marvel-fied on the new Thor, from what I've heard. No, I haven't seen it, and no, I'm not going to. I don't care. Fuck off. Anyway, I feel like this corporatization of the auteur is a big part of the reason we have so many middling films and games coming out of the industry right now. Mainly America, nothing gets in the way of art more than a bottom line. I suspect Japan might be allowing individual auteurs to shine through a little more. I think that's why so many products that you see coming out either rock or suck, rather than are just kind of meh. Though, I do fear that Pokémon has fallen deep down the corporatization ladder. Pokémon has like the strangest corporate structure of anything I've ever run into, where like part of it's Nintendo, part of it's the Pokémon Center, part of it is Game Freak. Like it's messy to say the least. So I guess it's not really a surprise that they're struggling. But I don't have any like actual data for any of this. I'm just kind of spitballing. The point I'm getting at is that I want more art that is willing to take risks and tell good stories. As much as I love Gundam, and I think it does stand a little bit above a lot of the other franchises of its size, there's no question that it still puts out lots of safe, uninspired content with the Gundam name just stamped on there. I'm very simply in favor of more art that makes a point and avoids the worst parts of capitalistic influence. I don't know, I just want to engage with more cool shit. I want to think and feel and have my life and worldview impacted by the art that I interact with. I want more shit that is going to hit me as deep as The World Ends With You, or Blind Spotting, or Sunbather. How was that for a list of things back to back? Holy shit. I want good art. And I think you can't get that when you're more worried about the money you're going to make than saying something. Also, you should really check out Gundam: The Witch from Mercury. The show is fucking awesome.